Dear participants, welcome to discussion on libraries and museums as safe spaces for dialogue and information literacy, organized by the Ministry of Culture of Latvia in cooperation with the Cros-Sectoral Coordination Centre of Latvian Government, Latvian National Commission for UNESCO, Latvian National Committee of the International Council of Museums, ICOM, and the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA. My name is Uldis Zariņš, and I am Deputy State Secretary for Cultural Policy at the Ministry of Culture of Latvia, and today I have the honor to host this event. Yesterday, Latvia presented its second report on implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals for from 2018 to 2022 at the UNESCO, at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. And this report was drafted by the Cros-Sectoral Coordination Centre of Latvian Government in close collaboration with all the ministries and agencies in Latvia. And during the drafting process, we realized that it is quite complicated to accurately reflect all the contributions that cultural sector is bringing to the table. So, as there are hardly any SDGs directly related to culture, but on the other hand, cultural actors are contributing to almost all of the SDGs, both directly and indirectly. So, to rectify this and shed more light on the ways culture contributes to SDGs, we decided to organize this event, focusing specifically on libraries and museums. But before we kick off, we have two welcoming addresses by Ambassador Andrejs Pildegovic, Permanent Representative of Latvia to the United Nations, and Ms. Anita Muizhniece, Minister of Education and Science of Latvia.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual high-level political forum side event dedicated to the transformative role of libraries and museums for advancing sustainable development through promoting dialogue and information literacy. Information and media literacy are key Latvia's priorities at the United Nations. We are proud to be among the frontrunners in responding to UN calls to counter misinformation and disinformation, and to have contributed to elevating this issue on the UN agenda. Addressing climate change and other environmental challenges, overcoming COVID-19 pandemic and strengthening preparedness for future emergencies, dealing with the far-reaching consequences of Russia's war against Ukraine. All these efforts require awareness and skills for navigating an increasingly complex information environment. Libraries and museums, as trusted public spaces, can play a facilitating role in raising awareness, promoting access to diverse and reliable information, and strengthening skills fit for the digital age. In this context, I especially encourage libraries and museums to utilize the Global Media and Information Literacy Week that was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in 2021. I wish you all a fruitful discussion today and hope that experience and best practice examples that will be shared today will inspire new and innovative partnerships for achieving peace and sustainable development. I thank you.
Greetings to all of you from the atrium of the Latvian National Library. I'm addressing you from the largest modern library in Latvia, National Library of Latvia, which has a collection of more than 4.3 million books. Behind me, you can see the People's Bookshelf, which contains over 7,000 books donated by individuals in Latvia and abroad. As part of the campaign, A Special Book for a Special Bookshelf, it is still possible for anyone to donate a book, thus emphasizing that library is a place created by people themselves and the importance of an individual and everyday stories. The history of libraries in Latvia backs to 1524, when the Riga City Library, later the Academic Library of the University of Latvia, was founded, while the first Latvian public library was founded in 1848 with 200 books funded by community donations. Apart from being so-called memory institutions, libraries and museums have long been crucial places for learning and inquiry, socializing and networking, and this role has become only more important in the 21st century. In times when societies are becoming increasingly fragmented, libraries and museums, as trusted, inclusive and accessible actors, are vitally important for a building of social trust and understanding. Libraries are increasingly significant when we talk about the democracy and civic participation. Not only here in Latvia, but all over the world, they are places that help people navigate digital space, gain information, and develop media literacy skills that allow them to interact with public authorities and to express their citizens' position. All this makes the voice heard, breaks down barriers between people, and strengthens community ties. Indeed, quite often we see how social bubbles and disinformation are polarizing society. People look for a safe space where equity, diversity, and inclusion are key elements in promoting and practicing the intellectual freedom. And I would like to point out that libraries and museums are one of key stakeholders of our educational institutions when we talk about developing new initiatives of lifelong learning and equipping people of all ages with the skills necessary to understand and cope with increasing disinformation, manipulation, and hate speech in the media space. I am proud that during the United Nations High-Level Political Forum, Latvia is hosting this discussion on the role of libraries and museums in creating safe space for engaging in respectful dialogue and for smart use of information. May you have fruitful discussions during this side event and plenty of inspiring ideas on how libraries and museums can become one's partners and friends and contribute to people's work on sustainable development.
Now, as I mentioned in the very beginning, culture is not a very prominent topic in SDGs. Culture as a goal is mentioned only in SDG 11.4, which is strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. The other SDG, which is highly relevant to culture, is 4.7, ensure that all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture, of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. The language used in SDG 4.7 provides a strong hint that cultural sector, especially through educational activities, can play a transversal role in achieving all of the SDGs. Often the impact of cultural sector is indirect, which is why it's so tricky to quantify and report this impact, but can be very powerful. For example, I would argue that a library program promoting environmental awareness can actually have much greater impact than a library mounting a solar panel on its roof. I think the greatest power of culture lies in that it can address societies through the language of arts, whether it's music, visual arts or literature, which is a very different language from the language used by politicians, scientists or media, for it can touch not only people's minds, but also hearts and souls. Culture can be a powerful instrument for societal change. However, it also means that the power of culture should be applied very responsibly. Culture, as all great powers, unfortunately can also be misused or even weaponized. So, it is of utmost importance that culture always serves a greater good. The Constitution of UNESCO states, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." I think this very powerful message is all the reminder we need to recognize how extremely important the culture is for SDG 16, promotion of just, peaceful and inclusive societies. At a time when societies are becoming increasingly polarized and fragmented, when we are being torn apart by pandemics and military conflict, culture can be the healing power we all so desperately need. It can be the needle to mend our ripped social fabric. And healing can only start when we come together, talk things out, and try to understand each other. For this, however, we need a safe environment. And we believe that libraries and museums are exactly such safe spaces, where reconciliation can take place, where people of different backgrounds and generations may freely explore knowledge, build information and media literacy skills, form opinions, and share their views in a respectful dialogue with other people, including in digital space. Why is it so? We believe that the core element here is the trust that both libraries and museums enjoy. Surveys of public opinion routinely rank libraries and museums as one of the most trusted public institutions, far ahead of governments, courts, and even armed forces or media. Therefore, trust and the reasons libraries and museums generate trust will be a central topic throughout today's discussion. This leads us to another important angle, that libraries and museums, both because of their public service mission and because of the trust they enjoy, can be very effective in achieving SDG 17, revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development. Libraries and museums can be excellent partners for almost any kind of social initiative, and we will show you some examples today. But we realize there might not be enough awareness of what libraries and museums are and can be, and how can they help their partners to achieve change and contribute to the implementation of SDGs. This is why we decided to organize this event, and also why the motto of this event is "Your Trusted Partner," hoping that after this event some of you might gain fresh ideas on how can you partner with libraries and museums in the context of SDGs. And in case you are wondering, the abbreviation you can see behind me stands for Ask Your Library, Ask Your Museum, which was the motto of online conference on libraries, museums and sustainable development, which was organized last year by Latvian, Estonian and Lithuanian museum and library associations and their partners, which to a great extent served as an inspiration also for this event, which is why we decided to reuse this call for action also for this discussion. Now, it is time to finally start with our program, but before we do that, we will also want to hear from you throughout the event. For this, we will be using the web platform slido.com, and you can use the QR code on your screen, or you can go to the website slido.com, and when you enter the code, which you also see on the screen, which is 1203005, you will see the question, which is, what is it that in your opinion promotes trust? So I invite you to go to slido.com and enter one word which best describes your opinion. so that we can generate a nice word cloud after this. Also, you can leave a question or comment for the discussion, which will take place at the end of the event on comments section on Facebook and YouTube live streams. So, with this, I finally give floor to our first speaker, Ms. Kristīne Pabērze-Ramirez from International Federation and Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA, who will tell you more about the different ways libraries are engaged in achieving SDGs. Welcome, Kristīne.
Thank you, Uldis. As Uldis said, my name is Kristīne Pabērze-Ramirez. I am with IFLA, International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. And at IFLA, I take care about the library map of the world. The library map is a resource that, among other things, provides an insight into how and at what scale libraries contribute to the sustainable development. And this collection of more than 50 stories about library projects and programs is a source of information for me that I'm going to share with you today. Sustainable development is all about caring for people and making our world a better place to live. It is about leaving no one behind and providing opportunities for growth. Libraries worldwide, they serve a number of crucial services, including awareness raising and access to information, safeguarding cultural heritage, promoting universal literacy, access to skills, and ICTs. Those are some of the core functions of library, and they tie in very closely with the ways how the SDGs promote change. Libraries build strong partnerships based on their own values, such as non-discrimination, inclusion, or equal opportunity. And therefore, libraries are ideally placed to drive and support contributions across all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they do. The greatest part of SDG stories that we have on the library map are all about the projects that are delivered in different partnerships for the benefit of communities. For example, in the Netherlands in 2019, partnership with the Ministry of Internal Affairs led to creation of a network of government digital service information desks in public libraries all across the countries. And libraries not only offer ICT skills training, but also serve as a first point of information about the digital government. And one of the program stakeholders shared that they chose libraries because of their 800 branches are close to residents and are easily accessible. And in this case, a mix of national policy and cooperation has enabled Dutch to implement a national-wide infrastructure to provide support to vulnerable groups. So this is about closing a digital gap and enabling more people to fully participate in a digital society. When it comes to skills development, libraries work with different sectors. And in the Latvian Voluntary National Review from this year, it was highlighted the work that the National Library of Latvia is doing both to support farming across the country, but also to support research and other work relevant to nutrition. And working with agriculture sector, for example, is not a unique thing. Here is another example coming from Ireland, where librarians are providing training and helping to fill information gaps in the agriculture and food sector. To deliver on SDGs, libraries partner with a wide range of partners, not only with governmental organizations. Here is another example. It comes from Sri Lanka, where the National Library formed a partnership with the Commonwealth of Learning to train thousands of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And the program's evaluation revealed a life-changing impact for its participants, with many learners eventually finding a job. focusing on helping the vulnerable and those most in need is shared among libraries worldwide. And here is an example from Singapore on a project where library not only trained a group of individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, but even employed them afterwards. Singapore's National Library Board partnered with the Autism Resource Centre and provided new learning and work opportunities for these people with special needs. And in addition, it helped with digitizing more than 1 million pages of heritage material that extended the reach of contents digitally available for academia and research and the public in general. Another level of partnerships is a municipal level. And here is an example from Germany, where the library joined the project developed by the city municipality called Future Training Opportunities, which is aimed at integration of refugees and migrants in Germany. And this project has actually resulted in the program's participant choosing a library as a place of work. And some of them already became full staff members in the library. Here I want to say that, and it's important to mention that libraries not only partner themselves with other organizations and with different types of organizations and groups, but they also connect and help establish partnerships. An example of such is the project from Argentina, where library brought together younger and older generations to facilitate skills improvement among seniors. And it was not the library staff who was doing an actual training in this case, but these were young people. And one of the program's participants shared that no one at home had the patience to teach me how to use a smartphone. I learned a new language of technology, but also had a place to socialize and make connections. Latvia's voluntary national review stressed the importance of libraries as spaces open to everyone and resources for building cohesion. And libraries are spaces for discovery and dialogue. And it was already years ago during a research study in Latvia that we found that about 20% of people or library users, they go to library just to talk to a librarian. And this proves has not been changed. And on the screen, you see here's the latest study on the value and impact of libraries. It comes from Denmark from 2021. And some respondents shared during this study that I come here every day instead of going home to an empty home, or it's a place that wants the best for me. And it is true, libraries want the best for their users. Libraries want the best for their communities, even in times when we cannot leave our homes physically to go to the library. In India, when the COVID lockdown hit, a single staff library connected more than 200 children on WhatsApp to provide online knowledge sharing and learning activities. And parents confessed at the end of the project that it not only helped to improve children's skills and talents, but that it helped them to keep their children active and happy during the lockdown time at home. Librarians leave their libraries to serve communities in places where people are. In this example from Philippines, the National Library is providing services to support the street children and out-of-school youth in the local park. So the library's book cart goes to the nearby park at least twice a week to work with this vulnerable group. And not only children developed an interest in attending school again, this program had a broader impact. According to the surveyed park guards, the children and youth have begun to follow the park rules and became more respectful both to each other and to the environment. Librarians make efforts to bring libraries to places where there were no libraries before. And I believe you will hear today about the project Traveling Libraries in the Galapagos Island. And this project has brought the first library to the island's only local school, which helps supporting school curricula. Schools are another big partner for libraries. Mobile libraries are there to reach remote places. In Colombia, as part of the peace process, the Mobile Libraries project seeks to contribute to a construction of peace in the rural areas and rural communities that suffered from the armed conflict, to promote social capital through library services and through culture, and to contribute to reintegration of ex-combatants back into a civilian life. And this public mobile libraries project was the first government initiative to reach the countryside zones or transitory normalization points. To summarize, I want to say that libraries build strong communities, and strong communities build more libraries. The last example that I want to share with you is a project from the Foshan city in China, where, based on understanding their community needs, Foshan Library, together with 5 district-level libraries, created more than 1,000 neighborhood libraries. These are mini public libraries in people's homes, aiming at making library resources and services more accessible to vulnerable groups and promoting communication and integration in the community. And libraries, or neighborhood libraries, how they call them, borrow a collection of books from the main library, serve over 10 other families, and organize different activities together. On the road of making our communities and the world a better place to live, sharing is caring. So at the end, I would like to invite you to explore these and other stories on the library map yourself. We do have stories about contribution and impact that libraries are making to all 17 SDGs across different areas of sustainable development. Thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Christina. So our idea was that each of the speakers giving you a high-level picture, we would also introduce a spotlight case, presenting you some of really hands-on ground-level experience on each of the topics we are discussing today. So on library topic, I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Tatiana Khranchak from Ukrainian Library Association, who will tell us more about best practice in Ukrainian libraries, and also how are you coping now with the terrible situation in wartime. So Tatiana, you have 5 minutes to tell your story.
Thank you very much. My name is Tatiana Khranchak, and I represent the Ukrainian Library Association. And on behalf of the ULA and myself, I'd like to thank for the invitation of this important forum. And my topic is devoted to highlighting the Ukrainian library's experience in conditions of the war reality. The Ukrainians suffered a powerful blow from Russia. Nowadays, our people are facing destruction and heavy losses. Our communities and people's lives are being destroyed, and we need support and protection more than ever. We are alive, and we are looking for places where we would be safe. We are looking for shelter, a point of support that would help us not to get lost in this mess and not to lose ourselves. Libraries created thousands of years ago to support the vitality of communities. Today help Ukrainians to survive in war conditions and provide protection, physical, informational, psychological, spiritual. And in the era of Zuckerberg, the limits of the capacity of various institutions and organizations are determined by their ability to establish network interaction. In addition to the fact that partnership and network interaction contribute to the development of civil society, they are the organizational basis for libraries to fulfill their main purpose, serving the sustainability of their communities. It is noteworthy that the slogan of the Ukrainian Library Association this year is Library, Joint Action for Your Dream. And the dream of all people of goodwill now is to win this terrible war. The Ukrainian Library Association built a network of partnerships that include volunteer and charity organizations, state authorities, publishing houses, universities departments, non-government organizations to help Ukrainians survive and win. Beyond the fact that many libraries are literally providing physical protection as bomb shelters, many of them from the first days of the war also became hubs of volunteer activities. Together with volunteer organizations, librarians, their readers, and residents of communities collect and make clothes and products for refugees and for front. In this way, a community of practice is being built, which forms a sense of unity that is important, first of all, for new members of the communities who left their homes to escape the war. This contributes to their social integration into the community in a new place and creates a sense of security. And such activity, unfortunately, is not totally new for us. It has been started since 2014, when the first forced migrants from the Donetsk and Lugansk region, as well as Crimea, appeared. In accordance with the order of the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine, dated 2014, about the project Libraries as Community Support Centers in the Conditions of War Threat, work with internally displaced people, libraries actively participated in such work, first of all in information, legal, and educational aspects. Cooperating with state authorities, a charity foundation, state structures like employment centers, psychological, social, and legal services, libraries help displaced people find temporary housing, find job, get information about their rights and ways to use them, renew social ties, get access to the internet and computer equipment to continue studying and work, attend language courses, improve and acquire IT skills, etc. In particular, with regard to the latter, the Ukrainian Library Association has established cooperation with the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, thanks to which many libraries have become digital education hubs. On the other hand, an important direction of libraries has become the work to increase the level of media literacy and the formation of critical thinking of the population, which is extremely relevant in the conditions of the information war. Therefore, the Ukrainian Library Association established cooperation with the Information Initiative, How Not to Become a Vegetable, in particular regarding the holding of free webinars for librarians and library users. Also, with the financial support of the International Scientific Research and Exchange Council, IREX, and the program Bibliomist, Guide Practical Media Literacy, a guide for librarians, has been prepared. Recent social conflicts and crises have brought up issues related to cultural characteristics, spiritual values, and ideas which in fact determined the identity of a community. The basis of self-awareness and the defining of the place in the social coordinate system is memory. Library is a social institute of memory and preserves the documented memory of humanity. For libraries' balanced, comprehensive activity in the field of preservation of cultural memory and national identity, the Ukrainian Library Association established collaboration and partnership with the Ukrainian Institute of National Memory, and an appropriate scientific and practical guide has been published. The partnership is a basis for survival and future recovery of libraries themselves, many of which have suffered due to the war. A lot of libraries' funds were lost, buildings were destroyed and damaged. These shots are just some of many cases. Due to the Russian aggression, 9 public libraries are completely destroyed, 115 heavily damaged, 124 lightly damaged, and more than 4,000 are under occupation. An important achievement of the Ukrainian Library Association was the establishment of interaction with partners for the preservation of library and information resources, assistance to libraries to maintain service, organization of efforts to restore damaged library buildings and lost library collections. Thus, together with the Library Country Charity Foundation, the ULA began recording the damage suffered by libraries from Russian military aggression. At the same time, the American Library Association, in cooperation with the ULA, launched the Fund for the Support of Ukrainian Libraries. Regarding the support of Ukrainian librarians who suffered losses and turned out to be in difficult circumstances as a result of Russian aggression, the ULA, in partnership with the Library Country Charity Foundation, launched a fund that will collect money to provide appropriate financial assistance. And on May 25th, this fund collected and handed over 350,000 hryvnias, or $11,000, to 150 librarians. And we also received 340 applications more from librarians in need. So to conclude, experience proves that partnership is a demand of our reality. Our libraries felt strong support from the entire library community, and we thank all our partners, Latvian colleagues who were among the first to support us, for their solidarity with Ukraine. Thank you also for the invitation and the opportunity to present our experience. Stand with Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana, for your touching story, and I can confirm that we are with you and we wish you to be strong, and Slava Ukraini. So, now we move to the museum side of the discussion, and I invite Mr. Henry McGee, a museum consultant from Curating Tomorrow, and also a member of the Sustainability Working Group of the International Council of Museums and ICOMs, to take us to the world of museums and tell how museums are dealing with SDGs. Henry, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much for the great honor to be able to speak today. So yeah, I work as a museum consultant, really trying to unlock the potential, the huge potential of museums to support sustainable development agendas. And one of the main ways I try to do this is I write this series of free guides that you can get from my website there. But I just thought I would mention the first one, which is shown in the top left there, Museums and the Sustainable Development Goals, because I spent a long time in 2019 thinking, well, how do the activities of museums connect with the Sustainable Development Goals? And I think it comes down to 7 main ways: how they protect and safeguard cultural and natural heritage, how they promote education, which of course is lifelong, how they promote cultural participation for everyone, which is a human right, how they support sustainable and responsible tourism, how they support research that helps achieve sustainable development outcomes, how they make their own daily operations contribute towards a sustainable future, and how they work with others in partnerships and collaborations to help sustainable development along. And so through these 7 activities, I reckon that contributes very directly to roughly 1/3 of all of the Sustainable Development Goal targets, all 169 targets. But we can also say that just as with education, culture and participation are really fundamental to the achievement of most, or very likely all, of the goals and targets. So as a few people have mentioned, culture is a cross-cutting consideration. But what I'd like to do to talk about today is to take a step back from museums and look at some of the calls that we find in very many international agreements, from the Convention on Biodiversity, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Refugee Convention, the Convention to End Discrimination Against Women, the UNDRIP for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and others. All of these agreements, these international agreements, talk about specifically the importance of education, freedom of expression, access to information, inclusion, and participation. In all of these agreements, we find it more recently in our Common Agenda and in the Call to Action for Human Rights, which are calling for a renewed social contract between authorities and the public. Similarly, we find it again in the outcome recommendations from Stockholm Plus 50 held just a few weeks ago, which said that we need to look to rebuild relationships of trust for strengthened cooperation and solidarity involving people and communities everywhere. But why is it that we see the importance of education and participation and inclusion in all of these agreements? Why do we see it in so many of these? Well, on one level, it's because they relate to very well-established human rights. These include the right to education, freedom of expression and the right to information, the rights to participate in cultural life, and the rights to participate in public affairs. And these are all rights which have existed for more than 70 years from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On another level, participation makes practical good sense. Participation helps make better decisions, it helps build legitimacy of decisions, and it helps to raise ambition, strengthen ownership of these decisions across society, and help them be achieved. But such participation, as we find in these many agreements, has not always happened. Too few people are aware of their human rights or the rights of others. Too few people are aware of governments or other authorities' agreements and commitments. Too few people have opportunities to contribute to decision making. The words have not always translated into concrete action. But on a practical level, again, governments often lack the physical spaces for day-to-day contact with people and communities. And civic space is more than just the place where the wills of governments are played out. Participation is a two-way street. And so we can say that Agenda 2030 is really an amazing mechanism for a few different reasons. Within these 17 goals and 169 targets, we have all of these existing agreements rolled into one programme. But we also have more than that. The agenda recognises and really emphasises the right to development, which emphasises that people need to be involved actively, freely, and meaningfully. And this phrase, active, free, and meaningful participation, really gives us a very good guide. And it means just that taking part has to be active in that people are not just passive consumers. It has to be free in that it's both free from interference and manipulation or censorship, but it's also where people are free to be imaginative and creative. And it has to be meaningful in that it influences the outcome. And it has to be participatory because it's about doing it together. It's about our collective imagination, debate, and decision-making for our collective common future. But where practically does this take place in society? And so I'd like to turn to a famous quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, from a talk that she gave in 1958 called The Great Question. So where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood that he or she lives in, the school or college that he or she attends, the factory, farm, or office where he or she works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. And I always find this an extremely powerful quote. But again, let's think, well, where does this practically happen? Where do these universal rights to participate, to take part, to take part in public affairs, where do these rights begin? So let us be specific. And I suggest that museums are one of these places, or at least they have the potential to be. They can turn these calls for inclusion, participation, and to leave no one behind into real experiences. They can support people's rights to education, to information and freedom of expression, to participate in cultural life and in public affairs through their active, free and meaningful participation. But why museums? Well, museums are an existing infrastructure. There are around probably just under 100,000 museums worldwide. That's a lot of museums. They reach huge numbers of people. Probably around 2 billion visits are made each year to museums. There are big ones, small ones, science museums, agricultural museums, art museums, history and archaeology museums, and very many more. There are small ones that are run by communities, as well as non-traditional forms such as open-air museums and eco-museums. They are much more than places that store old things. They're places where people, often strangers, come together to explore and express their humanity. They are places that connect people with the past, the present, other places, other cultures, and with one another. We can say that the transformation to sustainable futures relies on people's involvement. That means that we need spaces where people can explore both the world as it is and to debate and decide upon the future that they want. Sustainable development relies on radical creativity and joint decision-making. It needs everyone's ideas. And that is surely what active, free and meaningful participation means. And so I'd like to share a few of the different ways that museums can bring policy agendas and people together. So this is a small museum in Lancashire in England called the Whitaker, formerly quite a traditional museum that had a redevelopment in 2021. So it continues to do many of the familiar things of museums, exhibiting the natural and cultural heritage of the area, but it also reminds people about their human rights. And it talks about the Sustainable Development Goals, and it invites people to ask questions. What questions should we be asking right now for our community and its future? And I highlight this example just to say that the small places close to home really can be the very small places close to home, that sustainable development could be something that is applied to all museums around the world, all 100,000. Or secondly, to highlight an exhibition that is still on show at the Ethnography Museum in Stockholm. So at the same time as there was the Stockholm Plus 50 summit just a few weeks ago, which was a political summit, so it was not accessible to the public. Just almost by coincidence, there was this exhibition about the same topics, about the relationship between people and the rest of nature. So it covered a lot of the same ground, but in a much more inclusive way. And the third example I'll give here is from a project that was done for COP26, the Climate Change Conference, which was a competition that was launched in the year before, asking people around the world to reimagine the museum as an institution for climate action. So the reason I raise this as an example is to say that we can also invite people to reimagine the institutions that ultimately are supposed to serve them. And I really like the image on the right-hand side there, which looks across from a small model in the exhibition across to the COP26 venue. So we see here a range of different ways that museums can be more or less closely tied to local and global sustainable development agendas and challenges. Museums can help localize the agenda and the SDGs to local contexts with cultural considerations and to local challenges. And connecting the work of museums with current affairs and sustainable development challenges not only puts the museums to work, it strengthens their contributions to society and makes them more relevant to more people. Everyone can ask their museum what it is doing for sustainable development, or to tell it what they would like it to do. Upholding Agenda 2030's promise of active, free and meaningful participation ensures that museums bring people into public discourse and that institutions, culture and heritage are not simply being used as blunt instruments to deliver policy agendas. By aiming to be safe spaces that can be respectful of differences within a general commitment to the equal rights of everyone, museums can be places that not only have the easy conversations, but help people have the difficult ones too, to ensure that people can draw on culture and heritage as tools for peace and stability, rather than hatred and division. A sustainable future will not happen by accident. We have to make it, and we make it together. Museums can help ensure that this truly is a sustainable future, shaped by everyone, benefiting everyone, and built by everyone, and where no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And again, we move from the high-level picture to the local case, which will be provided this time by Miss Lolita Thompson from Janis Lipke Memorial Museum here in Riga, Latvia, who has joined me here in studio. So I'll...
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Happy to be here. So I know the title is kind of the cheeky one. Because Latvians, Russians and Jews do enter museum and the bar in our case. So I'll elaborate a little bit. What does it mean? About sustainable development goals, one of the things is strong society that actually in a different ethnic communities living together and interacting and being open and not full fear to actually open up and talk about their histories. So where I'm coming from, this is a Lipke Memorial, and it's dedicated to the Lipke family that rescued more than 50 Jews during the Second World War. So obviously it means that our museum by definition is a place where the different communities and ethnicities should feel safe also to talk about their history, and in many languages. So this is a reminder to myself and all my colleagues. We saw Ukrainian presentation, so this is no whining zone. This is a this is a time to do and to work for actually for the people around us. So this was Riga in 1941 during the wartime, when the people are separated in different groups. Those who can walk on the streets, the Jews who had to walk on with all the cars and horses. And so this is societies that obviously none of us want to experience ever again, even though we live kind of in a wartime at this point. Our thought in the museum was to create a Riga Talks that's kind of form the space where we can have discussions in Latvian and Russian and English for people who live here, people who live in Berlin, people who live in St. Petersburg, and perform poetry, art, discussions about the history, about the museums, about the culture, involving theater, and also stand-up. So that was our first attempt to do it, and we realized that we need also space outside museums. So the bar in the beginning is not a coincidence. We realized you have to go where the people are, even if they're holding some glass of wine. Here you see some of the participants that came from St. Petersburg in Riga Talks Poetry Squad. You see Latvian names and Russian names and different other names. So I just want to mention the guy Roma Gonza, the one on my left, the punk-looking one. He was the one that when the Russian one of the last free media TV channel, Dozh, was closed, he gave the last interview because he was very vocal against the war, and they did all kinds of these poetry reading performances at Mayakovsky statue, and also these people who came to Riga and performed at Kaņepes centers, like Kaņepes Center here in the pub, and Alaponia. these people actually were the ones who knew what to do when someone is incarcerated or someone is in detention, what to bring, whom to call. So it was a very different experience for us living in Riga in safety. These are some of the performance, and this was also for high school students who come from minority schools in Riga. And it was very surprising that, for example, when Anton Volodin, one of the performers, he read the poetry by heart, the high school students had like tons of questions for him. How you become a poet? How do you feel the language? What do you do? Like, it was very surprising for me that 11 in the morning people are capable of listening to poetry and actually asking questions. So it kind of brings these communities together. This was our last one, just before we just in the middle of the pandemic, we had a mixed media meeting here, and we decided that we need to use the local forces. Russian people who do stand-up and Latvian and people from Nigeria who live here. So we got them together, and this was our here. I'll just show you the snowflakes. You know, the snowflakes. It's a kind of a derogatory term, but you know, let's own it. So we get the people together and to laugh, to ask the questions, to maybe be ironic about these toughen up snowflakes. Also have to live in this world, and what was important is that it's not only the movies and discussions about that, but that once you are in a space that I hope museum provides, the space where you can be open and meeting other people. So it strengthens communities. It kind of minimizes these different stereotypes about each other. And it kind of makes this museum the space for different people to come even when they're struggling in society, and they can come together. So as I know it doesn't have translation, so it means show me where you hurt, and there's a poetry, Ukrainian poetry, Russian, Latvian, together, and it was also one of the few events just before the pandemic started, and we have a total lockdown. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say, and this is our kind of with the view to the future, that we want to have a House of Courage, to have an open space for people to meet and have educational programs now, and hopefully one day we'll meet all of you, and you know, and the situation will be much better, and the people who are persecuted now and people who are killed now actually. So I don't know, we can commemorate them and also to build a different society. So thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Lolita, for your inspiring story. And now the time has come to reveal what you have answered to the question we asked you on slide.com. So if we can have it on the screen, and we do have, and I say it's not very surprising. Honesty and authenticity seems to be the top answers to the question what promotes trust, and it seems to be also two of the traits that both libraries and museums certainly share. And we also have other keywords like values, respect, equality, trustful information, experience, and not politicians, which is, I think, also very interesting notion. Yep. So thank you for these answers, but we are not done yet. We have another question for you now, not asking you to enter keywords, but to use your numerical skills. So if you go down again at the slide.com via the QR codes or straight via the browser, and enter the same code 120030005, 03005, we are asking you to rate, to voice your opinion. How strong do you see is the potential of museums and libraries to generate trust in a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being really not very good and 5 being excellent? So I see one answer already saying 4, which I think is very good, and 5 we also have coming in. So you can keep doing this, but while you are doing this, I invite the third speaker, Ms. Maha Bashri from United Arab Emirates University, who will talk about a very specific area of work in which both libraries and museums are very active, which is media and information literacy. So, Maha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for this opportunity to partake in the discussion. I enjoyed listening to the speakers that came before me. My name is Maha Bashri. I'm an associate professor of communication at the United Arab Emirates University. Today, I am going to be speaking about media literacy and civic engagement and the role that libraries play as knowledge repositories. So civic engagement is very vital to public life. It contributes to the quality of public life, which in turn has a close proximity and relationship to the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It supports the development of social norms and trust that brings along beneficial effects on all society. For example, in education, in children's welfare, in safety in communities, health, happiness in society, and the quality of government. When people actually do partake in civic engagement, when they are actively engaged in the public sphere, this really has a positive correlation on the quality of government. Civic engagement is related to political participation in that conventional sense, but at the same time, it more broadly refers to how citizens connect with life within their respective communities. It is about having a sense of community, a sense of belonging, which is very, very important if we're to have stabilities in the societies that we live in. So when we talk about civic engagement and public life, you know, as I said, they have a very close, or it has a very close relationship to the 17 goals, but in particular SDG 16, which is the peace, justice, and strong institutions. Strong institutions, or when we have peace, obviously, then you have a more just society, which means this leads us to have, for example, gender equality, which is SDG 5, which leads us to have reduced inequalities, SDG 10. When we have strong institutions, that means we can have SDG, for example, 8, which is decent work and economic growth. So they're all intertwined, or they all overlap, but specifically civic engagement has a very close relationship to SDG number 16. So when we talk about media literacy's role in civic engagement, media literacy is both formal and informal educational experiences that citizens have, which contribute to building their knowledge, their skills, and their attitudes that are associated with civic engagement, with being part of their communities, with being vocal, with having voice, with having agency. Citizens not only need access to information, they also need the means or the skills and the motivation to process that information effectively. In other words, the critical thinking skills. You give people the tools, you educate people, and then they're the ones who have to have the motivation to use the tools provided to them. So it's a constellation of skills, which include knowledge about the media, knowledge about message analysis skills, about how to compose composition of messages, and collaboration skills that we think are valuable to citizens if they are to be active participants in a public sphere, in a vibrant and healthy public sphere within their respective communities. So media literacy, information literacy, and digital literacy are all tied together to the use of information resources because they help people deal with the complexities of the current information environment. We are in a very complex information environment now, especially with the new media, with the new platforms that we have. Therefore, people need to have skills that enable them to navigate this complex media environment. So civic engagement is associated with both social demographic variables, but in our case here, we're focusing on the media use habits. And this is where the role of libraries comes in. So the skills that we need for a vibrant democracy and freedom of expression is, or that citizenry needs, is the ability to access information, the ability to analyze information, the ability to reflect critically on the information provided, the ability to create information, and the ability to act on the information or the analysis that respective individuals do reach. Media literacy education is formally incorporated into the classroom in many countries around the world because it helps people or the students acquire the needed skills, but it's also a lifelong process. It is not only within the confines of a classroom, it is the responsibility of communities as a whole to foster these skills or to enable people to gain these skills as we move along to navigate these new media systems that we have. So the basis is an educational program that affords or provides a kind of intellectual and social base that supports the development of civic engagement. In other words, the necessary skills. So education comes at the bottom, or it's like the base for us. But then we move on throughout life. We have to find other ways to build on the education that we have. Media literacy helps citizens gain direct experience with practices, especially now of online media, in publishing, in discourse, in debate, and in collective action, while at the same time agreeing to disagree, having respectful discourses, having or looking into different narratives and looking into issues through different lenses. It's a tool for strengthening the citizenry's participation, especially young people, in civic and political life. It enables people to ask the good questions, to seek out information on relevant issues. It aids them in evaluating the quality of information that is available and engaging in dialogue with others to form coalitions and to form understanding, to foster a better and a more cohesive community. Now, the role of libraries as knowledge repositories comes in because there's an overlap between media literacy and information literacy and digital literacy, which are traditionally perceived as linked to the library sector. Libraries are facilitators. They're an important tool in propagating civic engagement. They play an important role in strengthening democracy on two levels, one that is passive and the other one that is active. Passive, for example, is in the, can be in the provision of space, in the provision of technology for people who don't have access, accessibility. Active can be in offering services that expand on user knowledge and in turn their role as members within their communities. For example, voting services. You can have open house forums where you have candidates come in and talk about what they're offering on their platform. People can come and vote in libraries, and this takes place in lots of places around the world. So libraries can be viewed as living organisms because they change with the times. We've had libraries since, the beginning of history. They're in a state of constant flux and change, and they adapt to society's needs and development. So they're an integral part of societal development. Public libraries should aim nowadays to increase access to information, to disseminate knowledge, to promote democracy, equality, and social justice, as well as providing cultural education and promoting meaningful leisure activities by acting as a public institution and social meeting place. And their credibility stems from the fact that they are neutral, that there's no bias, they don't have any political bias. They provide public spaces and resources for community events that bring people together. And this is really important because we want to bring the communities together if we want them to partake in civic engagement. They foster a sense of community and belonging. And community in turn leads to participation and engagement, which again in turn leads to trust in civic and political skills. Libraries provide socially and culturally inclusive spaces. They are open for everybody or to everybody within a community. You know, different people, different ethnicities, different groups. It brings different discourses and different ways of looking at things. They are the tools that aid in facilitating engagement and civic participation. So if we're looking at a framework for sustainable human development, we need to understand that media literacy education is not a magic bullet solution. It's a tool that it's not gonna automatically ensure that we're gonna have engaged citizens. But we need to have continued development of programs that address societal needs and development aids. Libraries remain the constant facilitators throughout history. I mean, if we trace this from a historical perspective, throughout history, libraries have been constant facilitators of, you know, of community and knowledge repositories. This is where we go to get our knowledge. So if there's a hierarchy, if we look at this through a, you know, the lens of a pyramid, civic engagement is at the top. This is the end goal or the conclusion that we want for a vibrant democracy, for a peaceful and just society. Media literacy are the skills that people need to acquire to reach that point. And libraries are the facilitators that enable our citizens to have these skills that will ensure that they are engaged within their societies and communities. I'd like to end by saying that libraries and media and information literacy skills, they are, as Gibran Khalil Gibran, the poet, said, "The teacher who is indeed wise does not bid you to enter the house of his wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your mind." This is what media and information literacy does or should do for citizens. This is what libraries do or should do for citizens. It opens knowledge, avenues, and pathways to knowledge. And people will, or individuals will then take this knowledge or this wisdom, leading themselves to the threshold of their own minds. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation today.
Thank you, Maha. And again, we move from the high-level picture to a practical best case story, which will be presented by Mr. Edgardo Ciballero. I'm sorry if the pronunciation is not correct, who is from Charles Darwin Foundation in Ecuador, Galapagos Islands. And he will present us a really exciting story about libraries in Galapagos. So please, Edgardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here today presenting my experience and learning about your point of view and your experience. As I have been introduced, my name is Edgardo Ciballero. I am from Argentina, but I am currently living and working in the Galapagos Islands. For those of you who are not very aware of the position, the geographical position of the Galapagos Islands, I have to say it's 1,000 kilometers off the shores of Ecuador in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That's quite far and that's quite isolated. I am the only librarian, archivist, and museologist in the island, and we only have one library, one archive, and one museum, one small museum, belonging to the Charles Darwin Foundation. That's an NGO working for the conservation of the biodiversity in the Galapagos Islands. I work in the Charles Darwin Station, research station in Puerto Ayora in Santa Cruz Island, which is one of the biggest towns in Galapagos. There in the research station, we have this building where I manage the library, the archive, and the museum. The only ones active right now in the islands, and the oldest one. Our library is 60 years old, and before that, there were no any sort of libraries in Galapagos. Right now, you don't have any sort of library, except some small libraries at the schools. And we are working toward changing that. But I arrived in Galapagos 4 years ago. And I have worked all my life with social responsibility, social and critical librarianship. I am a librarian. I have worked for 25 years in libraries all over the world. And my first impression was that the library, which I had to organize, was a very different space of the archive and a very different space of the museum. Okay, actually, we didn't have a museum. We have some sort of collection of old stuff somewhere in the building. So I had to overcome these differences, which in my opinion are absolutely artificial, between library collection, archival collection, and museum collection. We are talking about heritage. We are talking about knowledge and memory of a big community, the Galapagos community in my case. So I started organizing everything as a whole from an integral point of view. I was handling the knowledge and the memory of my institution, which is a scientific institution, but also of the community, of Galapagos community. I have to say that Galapagos is a very protected area. It is a national park, it is a biosphere reserve, it is a humankind heritage. So humans are allowed only in 3% of the territory. Otherwise, you are not allowed, is absolutely protected. Anyway, we have a very strong population, human population there with a very particular history. You can imagine over there isolated without much contact with the world except the tourism. Okay, but the tourism doesn't have a lot of contact with the local population. So the local population has a very strange history. It's actually sometimes it's kind of weird, okay? It has a lot of legends, it has a lot of adventures, it has pirates, it has whalers, it has colonies, it has explorers, scientists, Darwin, of course, everywhere. And all that knowledge, all that memory is in my institution. I have to handle it. And I cannot make differences between archive, library, and museum. Everything is part of a larger corpus of knowledge, okay? After realizing that and after working with that, and you have to understand that I work for an NGO, so we don't have a lot of money. We have to work with donations and, well, sometimes with pure imagination. I started noticing that around me in the community with I was working, there were no libraries. Actually, right now, we don't have a bookstore, okay? So there were no libraries. In some islands, there are 4 inhabited islands. One of them never had a library in its history. I started noticing that, for example, teachers at the school, they have a wild need of information. People working with nature, like the national park rangers or the guides for the tourists, they needed a lot of information. The community didn't remember its own history. So all that information I had in my library, in my archive, in my museum was needed by the community. So I started organizing spaces where I brought all the knowledge, all the memory to the community. On the one hand, by supporting schools and professionals working in Galapagos and living in Galapagos, but also by creating a system of mobile libraries which travel as luggage, okay? So they travel by boat to different islands and they visit different schools, local small schools with very few children. And I bring to them books, I bring to them digital information because the internet here in the islands is really crappy. And after that, and after a couple of years working with them, they told me, okay, that's fantastic, but we need more access to our memory. Okay, not just scientific information, not just modern information, but also past information. Why we are here, who we are, why should we protect our environment? Okay, so what's the path, what's the road until here, and what will be the road from here on? So I started a digital project called Galapagiana, which is a digital platform where I organize all the information I have in the library, archive, and museum, but like a fabric, okay? Like different threads of a fabric, intertwining, having conversations, different pieces, a book, a letter, a picture, a map, having conversation between them. I don't think I am creating all this work here in Galapagos to comply with some international objective, although obviously I respect it. I think I'm doing all this because of my own commitment with the community, because information is power, knowledge is power, and I know that in my library, I have a lot of knowledge that can change how people in Galapagos see themselves and how people in Galapagos see their territory. Okay, and for me, people and territory are exactly the same, are a single thing. So in order to understand why they exist, why that territory exists, and why both people and territory should keep existing, all the information I have in my library is extremely useful. It's a very powerful tool. And that's the reason because I am doing what I am doing. Of course, I am a member of a number of international organizations like IFLA, for example, and I acknowledge and recognize the value of higher guidelines and higher policies. But in my personal case, I think my very first step in this process is my own commitment with the people, the knowledge that I have a set of skills that may be useful for the people in Galapagos. You are invited to visit our library whenever you want, if you have the chance to visit Galapagos, and to contact me for further details. I will be more than glad to share all our experiences, which are larger than that, with you. And well, again, thank you very much for including me in this exceptional event.
Thank you, Edgardo, for another very inspiring story. And actually, we had a question in comments coming from Naval Vasvani. How do you support establishing a library? So I hope Edgardo at least partially responded to this question. But now we have to look at the results of our previous poll. So what do you think about the potential of museums and libraries to generate trust? And I have a camera in front of me. Oh, it's actually 46%. Almost half of you say it's 5, it's brilliant. And 4s and 3s are much less. And I think very important, no 1s or 2s. So it shows that museums and libraries apparently really are able to generate trust. So average score is 4.3. I think it's excellent result. But we still have something like 10 minutes to go and still have one question for you, which is how do you rate the potential of museums and libraries to implement SDGs? So that was the question, right? Yeah. How strong is potential of museums and libraries to contribute to the full implementation of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. So you have some 10 minutes to answer also this poll, but I invite then Lolita next to me, because now we have finished with our regular program. And come the other side, okay, and have a little bit of discussion, or at least comments from audience as well. So surprisingly, not many questions coming in from you, but some really good remarks. So for example, Gabriel Köhler says that this is really a neglected and important tool for democracy and learning. And Samira Al-Hossani from United Arab Emirates said that this is really an interesting and highly important topic, and she's sharing with us that in United Arab Emirates they are moving to integrated curriculum, where libraries and museums play an important role in our curriculum, and also they have established a poetry academy which creates, shapes and improves poets in both MSA poetry and Nabati poetry. And Ujis Zanders writes that he really appreciates the very inspiring reflections from Professor Maha Bashri, and especially the excellent points regarding civic engagement. So it's really important to provide the space, but also promote the engagement. The media literacy is essential. So, and actually we had also a written comments coming in.
There are comments from Facebook also,
Oh,
especially for Ukrainian colleagues. Inga Surgont about the amazing determination and professional capacity in these extreme circumstances. Thank you for sharing experience of Ukraine, Zana Greenwald, and also to Ukrainian colleagues. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for work you do in times of war, in times of threat to heritage. That's Facebook comments. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it seems that people are really enjoying and appreciating the practical examples. So I think we found a fine balance between high-level stuff and really practical examples. Sure. And we have a written comment coming from Government Libraries and Information Network of Jamaica. So they acknowledge that libraries can and should be at the heart of SDG implementation, and that the implementation of SDGs requires whole-of-society approach that emphasizes the importance of stakeholder action to the long-term achievement of the goals. And they see that libraries are at the intersection of implementation, facilitating and coordinating activities through their regular operations and special projects, for example, disseminating information to aid food production that contributes to food security, providing space for training of youth and persons from vulnerable communities. As information repositories, libraries also store resources for cultural development, economic growth, and public information related to governance and civic life. So they see that libraries are uniquely positioned to advance the 2030 agenda. And in Jamaica, libraries are providing the country's workforce with credible, authentic, and current information, skills, abilities, and tools to enable functional and sustainable government and advance digital inclusion through access to ICT, internet connection, and digital skills. And from promoting literacy to offering free access to information, libraries are safe, welcoming spaces at the heart of communities and with deep understanding of local needs. So again, emphasizing the communities. So I think if we don't have any questions more coming in from participants, from audience, I think I still have time to ask you at least one question. Which is, we talked a lot today about what libraries and museums are doing in physical space, in physical environment. So all of the examples, I think, were mostly taking place in a physical space. But what your experience, what your thoughts are, what can libraries and museums also do in a digital space where a lot of people, especially youth, are spending a lot of their time on lives? So maybe Lolita is next to me. You can give us an idea?
First of all, Latvian National Library, it was a great resource, also for school kids, but also for us, when they open up public scanned newspapers, magazines for everyone to look for and to find I don't know, about their villages, about the names of their cousins or grandmothers, you know, and discovered good and sometimes bad things actually. So I think it also builds like belonging in community. I found my great grandfather, how he's in Soviet newspaper telling how bad the ovens are built in Ventspils. He's critical, you know. Of course, it was like no, but it's one of the ways how you belong to the community. And for museums, I think the museums learned a lot to do to provide the lectures and the different ways how you interact with public when they can't actually come to the museum. So now it's people are surprised, like you're having event and it's not streamed live. Hello, I'm in, you know, in Liepāja or somewhere else. I need that. I need this availability, and that's true actually, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think one of the ways is you find your audiences. And it's not in Riga or in Latvia, they could be everywhere actually.
Yeah, like this event. So I think Edgardo also mentioned the digital resource on Galapagos he is developing, and I really like the connection. So it all started physical community work and so on, and it's kind of naturally led also to digital presence of this project. But maybe Christina, you have anything to add from your IFLA map?
Yes, I think libraries are as good in physical environments as in virtual environments. So what happened during the last 2 years, I think it proved that libraries are really adapting to the changing environments and the changing needs of communities that they serve in reality. So I think it's nothing new, but the libraries, especially public libraries, they're mirroring their communities, and it's it's incredible what can be done when you really are focused on the community needs. So there are many examples, and I showed just a couple of them during my intervention in the beginning, but the map contains many more examples of both libraries doing activities in the physical environment, not only in their libraries, but also outside the library walls physically, but also making resources and information available in a digital environment. And this has increased a lot during the last 2 years of the pandemic.
Yeah, Henry, what would you add? I'm kind of interested in the aspect that in a physical space it's much easier to define your community, who you're working with. It's in a digital, it's the world. So
yeah, so I think, so what I would say there was, like, because if collections are a kind of distributed knowledge resource, that because SDGs 14 and 15 are under review this year, I'll mention them. Because for most living things in the world, museum collections continue to be the best source of information on when they or where they occur or where they did occur. So really making the huge volumes of information on specimen labels available globally via the internet is really one of the best ways that museums can contribute to conserving nature. So that would be my suggestion.
yeah, thank you. Tatiana, how are now libraries working with communities in an digital aspect of law?
Thank you very much. I'd like to add that libraries can make also a virtual community. So we can use digital instruments, digital tools to support our physical community, local community, but also we can even more possibilities. And due to the modern information technology, we can increase our audience, and we can involve even other audience in other countries, and create international audience and international community based on our common values. So I agree with the previous speakers.
Thank you. And Maha, would you have a comment as well?
Well, my only comment would be that, we need to also put in mind that the world there's a digital divide. There are lots of people that don't have access, and libraries play a very important role in providing accessibility, even though now we have a pandemic, which is still ongoing. But people who would have not had access otherwise will go to their public library to be part of this global village that we're all, we all assume that everybody is a part of. So I think within the physical realm and the digital realm in countries, and that is more than 50%, this is the southern hemisphere of the world, more than 50% of human beings are not connected. Libraries can play a vital and integral role in connecting everybody, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely important.
Also, the museums made and libraries made not only podcasts, but also all these different routes where you can take the app and travel around, explore your city. I explored during pandemic other places, and people from other countries explored Riga, like hiding places for Jews or the history of Rezekne, It's also something that suddenly was available, for everyone.
Yeah. I would certainly love to continue this discussion, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So we were supposed to clock in at an hour and a half, and as usually, it turned out to be not enough. But we first have to look at the final answers to the final poll. Oh, it's not so rosy anymore. So yeah, that probably not surprising. So it's still a good score. I think it's 4 points on average, but yeah, it seems that definitely we have a space to grow in terms of impact of museums and libraries contributing to the implementation of SDGs. So that was our final question, but with this, I think we have come to the conclusion of this event. And of course, I think it gave all of us a great glimpse of how libraries and museums are engaged in achieving a wide range of SDGs together with their partners. And hopefully this discussion inspired you to ask your library and your museum to become your partner in achieving your sustainable development goals. And of course, before we conclude, I have to say thank you to all the institutions and people involved in preparation and running of this event. So first of all, I would like to thank the Cros-Sectoral Coordination Centre of Latvian government and Ms. Mara Simane personally, who came up with this idea and encouraged us to come through with this event. Then I also have to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia and the Permanent Mission of Latvia to the UN in particular, as well as Ministry of Education and Science of Latvia. Then thanks go out also to Latvian National Commission for UNESCO and particularly Ms. Inga Surgunte personally, who was very invaluable in fleshing out the concept and also helping us to implement it. Thanks to the Latvian National Committee of the International Council of Museums and also the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, particularly Mr. Steven Weiber, who was not on screen today, but who was very instrumental also to help us find this concept of the event. And a big thanks goes out to my colleagues at the Ministry of Culture, particularly Ms. Baiba Murnece, who helped. Without her, this event wouldn't be possible. I would like to thank the educational company Lielvārds, who kindly agreed to host this event, and the technical team behind this event. And of course, the biggest thanks goes out to all of the speakers, particularly Mr. Henry McGee, who helped us a lot in conceptualizing the event. And also, I would like to thank all the participants of this event for your time and attention. And thank you for interest. And I hope that this discussion indeed will inspire at least some of you to initiate new ideas, new projects together with the libraries and museums in your country and in your community. So with this, I wrap up and say thank you to everybody again, and all the best in the future endeavors. Goodbye.